Conservatives need moral arguments, and they need to make so on the basis of religious arguments or the existence of God in society today. However, there are conservatives who are a little bit squeamish about doing so because they don't want to get in the murky waters of talking about religious ideas and theology. Now, on one hand, I can understand it, but on the other hand, I also have to say that right now we're seeing, as I expressed at the beginning of the show, the repercussions of a secular age, and therefore we need to, as quickly as possible, discuss moral arguments from a religious perspective as much as we possibly can. Now, I think specifically of Matt Walsh, who's somebody I love to listen to and is somebody that I know believes that the moral argument is the best, one of the best arguments for the existence of God. So I know he believes this, but he has often on his show, said things like this.
He cited his Christian faith as well when explaining why he refused to participate in his team's Pride Night festivities. And it is indeed a very good reason, because a faithful Christian cannot possibly wear or carry that flag. You can't do that while also remaining true to your faith. It is a one or the other sort of situation. When your employer says to you, "Oh, put this pride flag on," these are mutually exclusive things. You can either stay true to your faith, your Christian faith, or you can participate in this sign of loyalty to this other religion. You can't have both. But I will also say that as a Christian myself, I still tend to think that, you shouldn't need to give your Christian faith as a reason.
Matt Walsh here is stating a really important fact, I think, in a more broad way, but I do want to whittle down specifically. But his ultimate point here is that a hockey player who wrote on Twitter that he's a Christian and he's not going to wear a pride flag was totally unnecessary, because it should not be incumbent upon this man to try to defend himself against the predations of pride flags, because it shouldn't even be there in the first place. Now, while I 100% agree with this, I also want to take issue with the idea that we don't need to create religious arguments here. Now, he's not saying we don't do them at all, but I have heard Matt on his show in the past say that we just need logical arguments or scientific arguments to prove this. But I want to push back on that gently and just say this, that conservatives, Christian conservatives, have been doing this to some degree or another without much effectiveness, because we've taken away the most powerful aspect of the argument that we have in our arsenal, which is a theological understanding of the fact that you cannot even talk about good and evil, right and wrong, without God in the first place. See, the weight of our arguments is dependent upon a theological argument. So we need to insert religious ideas if we are ever going to make value statements in the first place. And it is an effective way of truly arguing, and that's why we need to do it. Michael Knowles puts this on full display as he wades into the very popular Gen Z podcast, whatever, because he makes sure to let this panel of young ladies to let them know that it is important for them, if they're going to make value judgments, to understand where those values come from. So here's him doing that.
Well, in your universe, you could pretend to be a bug with 17 arms. It doesn't make it true.
Michael, you can't bring religion into politics.
Well, you have to bring religion.
No.
All politics
I mean,
is
you can
religious.
take it into a factor, but you cannot let it set politics.
No, it has to.
No,
it has
because
to. Why
there's
not?
so many different religions. It's just like you can't cater to one.
But
Being Catholic, you can't cater to just Catholicism.
Why not?
Because you have people in the United States.
But what if I'm not religious?
Well, that's your problem.
It's not my problem. It's my life.
Well, sure, but it's a problematic aspect.
Why it's a problematic aspect?
Well, because certain things are true and certain things are false. So, like for instance, if I said right now, hey, is it better to bake a pie for a widow or kick a little baby in the head? Would you say one of those things is better than the other thing?
You can't compare that because you're taking things out of context.
No, but I'm just asking, would you look at that situation and say, you have two choices here. You can either bake a pie for the widow down the street, or you can kick that little baby in the head. Would you say one of those things is better or worse than the other one?
Yeah,
yes.
probably.
Yeah, so if you're going to make a claim that something is better or worse as a moral question, then you are now taking recourse to religion, because that's a religious view.
Now, like, before I go any further, I have to literally give praise to Michael Knowles for, like, sitting through this conversation with these girls that say like and literally about 300 times in a sentence. So this group of Gen Z podcasters is a little bit to handle, especially when you take into account that there are way too many young girls with too many microphones in that room to actually have a substantive conversation. So kudos to Michael for trying to make it happen. But before I get to Michael's religious analogy, I want to talk about what the girls said, because one of them said, well, you can't make religious arguments about issues in society because there's way too many religions and you have to respect each and every religion if you do that. And some of those ideas are conflicting and yada, yada, yada. You get the point. There's just too many religions to actually do that. Dear girl, please understand that the left is equally as religious as the conservative Christian or the conservative religious right person. They just use irrational religious arguments. They defer to identity and make identity politics arguments and intersectionality arguments. And then they make arguments like my body, my choice without ever recognizing that like the body in your body isn't actually your body. So that's a liturgy of sorts because it is completely based upon a false superstition rather than it is actually a rational truth. Now, bring Christianity into the picture, and you actually have liturgy with rational common sense to it. So let's just be really clear that there are some false religious arguments and some adequate religious arguments all around. So it's not a matter of whether we're going to make religious arguments. It's a matter of which religious argument is the right one. As I've said before on the show, everybody's worshiping something. It's just a matter of if you're worshiping that which is right. So let's be clear that in the present, there are even atheists who are rediscovering religious arguments and biblical truths that need to be grappled with. So if you're going to be critical and you're going to be rational, it's important that we analyze religious thought and religious ideas and we let the cream rise to the top. So before, in other words, we just say, we're not going to talk about anything religious, it's important that we be open to those ideas and we have a conversation about them and that we allow them to enter into the conversation so that we can see if they hold any weight or any value. It's perfectly hypocritical to remove them before you're even willing to have a conversation about them. And most importantly, you need to insert religious arguments and religious ideas into conversations about societal issues because of Michael's analogy. Now, he gives the pie analogy. Would you rather kick someone in the head, kick a baby in the head, or give someone a cherry pie? One of the girls says, yeah, probably. I mean, that is the perfect, religious argument from the left. Yeah, probably not. Yeah, absolutely. That should end the debate right there. It tells you everything you need to know about these young girls, and it tells you everything you need to know about secularism. It is not rooted in anything true. But nonetheless, we move forward to get to the heart of what Michael is saying, and he's saying something that needs to be heard. He's saying this: the moment you make a value judgment, you're making a moral judgment. And you need a moral law in order to make moral judgments. And there is no such thing as a moral law without a moral lawgiver. Now, you may ask yourself, why? Well, simply put, if there is not a standard, an ontic referent, as it were, a being that was ultimately good, we would have no understanding of what good actually is. So what do we know? How do we know what good is if we don't have anything to judge it against so that we know what evil is? When we know this is good and we know this is evil. Nonetheless, we also know this: objective evil does exist. It is evil no matter where you are in the world today to abuse a child. Now, the atheist will give you some kind of utilitarian argument and try to say, well, we understand good simply based upon what is in the best interests of the majority. Well, of course we know that to be a fallacious argument, because all you need to point to is the left's favorite talking point, even though they know little about it, is to point to Nazi Germany. It was believed by the majority that the best thing to do would be to put people in concentration camps and to get rid of Jews and to make a perfect society. And even today, you can make some kind of morally reprehensible argument that might actually benefit the majority of people, but is still morally reprehensible. That's because objective morality exists. And by that I mean simply this: that regardless of the observer, this truth remains. So in other words, it is a transcendent truth. When we talk about what religion that we should choose from, because there are so many, that question was self-evident in the past. How about this? I suggest we do away with all of the many religions of the world and just focus on the 3 major religions of the world. That would be Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So we focus on those 3 religions and we let them compete together and see which one has the most beneficial ideas to society. And then you could also pick up a history book and you could see how the wisdom of the ages that has been passed down to us in the present, where it comes from. And then we could also pick up a history book long enough to look at the greatest society in the history of the world and see that it was built upon a specific set of principles that come from Christian truth. So it wouldn't take you long, and it wouldn't take much of your scrolling time thumbing through Instagram to pick up a history book and realize that Christianity stands apart in history as a world religion that is complete with moral values that are sufficient for building a society upon. And that society better get some help, because we've got a room filled with women who are steering society, along with others, quickly toward a cliff because they failed to recognize what almost every generation in human history could teach you. The simple truths found in Scripture, one of which, there is a God, and you ain't him. So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely want to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.